So, in the summer of 1965, the Vietnam War was on the verge of a massive change. We're diving into something called Operation Starlite, and believe me, this was not just another skirmish. This was the very first major ground offensive fought entirely by U.S. forces, and it ended up setting a pretty bloody precedent for the entire conflict. And what's really incredible is that this whole thing kicked off because of a single tip-off. So, how on earth did one warning from a Viet Cong defector lead to a massive battle with thousands of troops? And maybe more importantly, what did this first big clash tell us about the brutal nature of the war that was just getting started? Okay, so our story really begins at the brand new Chu Lai Air Base. By the middle of 65, this place was a huge deal, a jet-capable airfield that was absolutely crucial for American air power. But, being that important, well, it also put a giant target on its back. Things escalated so fast. I mean, in just a matter of months, the U.S. mission went from just, defending a perimeter to actively hunting for the enemy. By early August, the commanders had gotten the green light to go on the offensive. And then, on August 15th, they got their big break. A Viet Cong deserter literally walked into the headquarters of the South Vietnamese forces and dropped a bombshell. He told them that the battle-hardened Viet Cong 1st Regiment, about 1,500 fighters, was hiding just 12 miles away. And their plan? To completely overrun the airbase. This was a credible threat, and suddenly, the clock was ticking. So, with the enemy's location blown, U.S. commanders had to act, and they had to act fast. They scrambled to put together a preemptive strike, basically throwing together this incredibly complex operation in a frantic 2-day rush. And here is a little piece of trivia for you. It's pretty great. The operation was originally supposed to be called Satellite, but during all this rushed planning, the power went out. A clerk had to keep working by candlelight, and in the dim light, he made a simple typo. And just like that, Satellite became Starlite, and the name stuck. The strategy they came up with was a classic hammer and anvil. So the anvil force would land by sea, right on the coast, to block any escape. Then the hammer would come in by helicopter further inland, attack, and push the enemy right into that trap. The goal was to completely annihilate the Viet Cong regiment. On paper, it was a perfect plan. But as it so often goes in war, the plan met reality on the morning of August 18th. And those neat, clean lines on the map, they just dissolved into a chaotic, desperate fight for survival. The trouble started almost right away. One of the helicopter landing zones, called LZ Blue, was placed almost directly on top of the Viet Cong's 60th Battalion. The VC actually held their fire as the first choppers came in, let them land, and then just opened up with everything they had. Instead of launching an attack, the Marines were immediately thrown into this ferocious defensive firefight. And then, believe it or not, things got even worse. A resupply column with amphibious tractors and flame tanks got lost trying to get to the front line. They took a single wrong turn and drove straight into a perfectly executed Viet Cong ambush. You can feel the sheer terror of that moment in this one harrowing detail. The radio operator in that ambushed column just held his mic button down, broadcasting a continuous, desperate plea for help. His panicked voice completely tied up the command network while his unit was being torn to pieces. The whole battle just fell apart. It went from a coordinated sweep to this series of frantic, isolated fights. The rescue forces they sent to help the ambushed column, they got pinned down themselves. The clean hammer and anvil idea had shattered into a confusing mess of small unit firefights all across the rice paddies. So, as the initial really intense fighting started to die down, U.S. forces began to regroup and figure out the brutal cost of the battle. But the job? Well, it was far from over. Yeah, even though the main Viet Cong force had pulled back, a lot of fighters were still hidden. For another 5 days, Marines had to painstakingly search and clear this incredibly complex network of tunnels and bunkers. It was a real eye-opener for them, showing just how deeply dug in their enemy was. So what was the final toll? According to their own records, the U.S. lost 45 Marines, with another 203 wounded. The Viet Cong, on their end, later reported their own losses were somewhere around 200 total casualties. But this is where the numbers get truly wild. Check out what each side claimed they did to the other side. The U.S. reported a body count of 614 Viet Cong. Meanwhile, Viet Cong propaganda was claiming they'd caused 900 American casualties. That massive difference tells you a whole other battle was being fought right here. a war of perception. Which, of course, brings us to the big question about Operation Starlite. Who actually won? And the answer, as it turns out, really depends on who you ask. From the American point of view, Starlite was a clear tactical win. No doubt about it. They stopped the attack on Chu Lai, and they proved their whole combined arms doctrine could work. But the Viet Cong also claimed victory. Why? Because they had gone toe-to-toe with elite U.S. Marines. They inflicted casualties, and then they successfully escaped. For them, it proved they could stand up to American firepower and live to fight another day. So, in the end, Starlite was just this brutal preview for both sides of the long, grinding war that was to come. And that leaves us with one last, really crucial question to think about. While the U.S. definitely won the fight on the ground, Operation Starlite created a new American strategy. These big search-and-destroy missions, where success was measured by enemy body counts. Did this first victory accidentally lock the U.S. into a war of attrition, setting a bloody precedent that would end up being so costly and so divisive?